It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! It's Feedback Friday and my microphone's in the wrong position. Excuse me. There we go. That's a little better. Okay, so it's Feedback Friday and we have results. We have results, folks. Yes, we talked about finding a new word. Well, first of all, is it time to replace the term patriarchy in the way we talk about stuff? Seemed the overwhelming agreement was, yeah. And then what do we call it? And there were 107 comments on that video. So what I did was I went to the Discord and I copied a bunch of the suggestions for new terms. And then we discussed it and we came up with a term that was deceptively simple and is spot on. So if you want to be part of these discussions in future, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone can use but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. Discord links go out after the 5th of, well, not July. So now's a good time to sign up. And if you want a Leanna Care session for yourself or a friend or loved one, sign up. The contact form in the description box below. So the term that the Discord decided on was institutionalized sexism. And this one, it's nice and clean. People, it's immediately clear what it is. And there are a bunch of good reasons for this. One, it applies to discrimination against anybody on the basis of gender, not just women, anyone. I mean, as luck would have it, we have news this week that David Tennant, the 10th and 14th Doctor, he accepted an award, an LGBT award. His daughter, I believe, is trans. And he made a comment about, it doesn't feel right for him to accept an award for this stuff. But until the day that Kemi Badenoch, which is a British politician, no longer exists, and everybody laughed and he said, I don't wish any harm on her. I just want her to shut up. And Kemi Badenoch happens to be black. And her and J.K. Rowling went after him, saying a privileged, white, straight, cisgender male, wouldn't say cisgender, white male, doing this, telling a black woman to shut up. He never told her to shut up. He said he wished she would shut up. But also, what does that have to do with anything? They're using his gender against him. This is an example of two powerful, rich, connected people using a man's gender to invalidate his point of view, and using his race. But that's the thing. There is a way that women can use institutionalized sexism against men in certain environments. And this covers the fact that, male early childhood educators, male kindergarten teachers, even male primary school teachers, nurses who are men in places, they do experience sexism in their jobs. And so institutionalized sexism works with that. I have made the startling discovery that in fantasy romance novels, I'm reading fantasy romance novels, you can have a ton of nudity and sex in these books, and they're marketed as YA books, meaning young adult, meaning people under the age of 18 are reading these things. You can have tons of nudity and sex. Fantasy video games, you show a single boobie and people freak out, right? It's bad for women. That's institutionalized sexism. That if it's for men, it's bad. If it's for women, the exact same content is considered fine. We don't have time to get into that today. Another time. And this is where the MRAs start going, well, this proves a gynocentric society. It doesn't, and Please don't say gynocentric. It sounds too much like gynecologist, which takes people's brains a certain way, and it's intended to take people's brains a certain way, and you're reducing a woman to a body part. Please don't do that. I know that's not what gyna as the prefix or the beginning of the word means. It's where people's brains go. Please don't use it. If you want to stick to the idea that society favors women, just say woman-centric, you know? So that's what they do. You know, we know what the radical feminists and the trads and all that stuff, we know that. Ultimately, what they all have in common is all these belief systems benefit the people at the very top of society, the people who conform most to these gendered ideals. You know, if a woman wasn't married and had 12 kids, wouldn't see her the same way as Elon Musk. You remember when Angelina Jolie and Madonna were adopting a bunch of kids? Why do they need so many kids? But Elon Musk can have 12 kids. And people, well, they make jokes, but it's certainly not seen as the same way, right? What institutionalized sexism does, it doesn't benefit men. It doesn't benefit women. It doesn't benefit anybody. It demands people stay in their lanes based on gender. And that's the same way, quite frankly, institutionalized sexism does. And we can say that there's more of a hierarchy to sexism as opposed to gender tends to be like two parallel lanes. That's why I talked about that complementarian viewpoint. But it is very stay in your lane, conform to gender norms, right? If you are rich enough or powerful enough to defy gender norms, you can. But the rich and powerful often don't, because adhering to gender norms is expensive and therefore a display of wealth and power, right? Then again, if you look at, Hillary Clinton's pantsuits, she was making a point. Maybe if she didn't wear the pantsuits, she might be president, but we don't know. But institutionalized sexism ultimately protects the institution of gender. Not men, not women, the institution. And by institution, what do I mean? I had the definition of institution up. Give me a second. It's gone. There we go. Institution, a society or organization founded for a religious, educational, social, or similar purpose, or an established law, practice, or custom. So, for instance, gendered bathrooms are part of the institution of gender. And the reason that religious conservatives and, gender critical feminists both agree on, trans people in the bathrooms they feel more comfortable using are bad is because both those non-inclusive radical feminists and the trads, they are on two sides of institutionalized sexism, right? The rad femmes in this case want feminine dominance, take women and make them more powerful, hence going after David Tennant based on his gender. And the trads just want women to stay at home and men go out to work. And women and feminists, when you think about it, want women to stay in their spaces, their only spaces, and men go out into the world where it's dangerous. They're arguing the same institution. You see what I mean? Do you see how this works so beautifully? The institution of gender is not the definition of what is a man. It's what being a man means. Similarly, it's not the definition of what is a woman. It's what being a woman means, which is why defining the institutions of the institutionalized definitions of gender, why it's so hard. Because it's a loop, right? What it means to be a man defines what a man is. What a man is defines what it means to be a man. But where do you start? Do you start with the prescriptive definition? Or do you start with the prescriptive definition? The institution keeps everybody on that hamster wheel by saying neither and both. Institutionalized sexism believes that there is a natural order to gender, and it cannot change. And the whole reason the institution overpowers individuals is because it's so amorphous, because it can change based on trends. Every person, is spending so much time fighting over whether or not to be a proper man or whether or not to be a proper lady is the social consequences we will face worth performing subversive acts of gender. That's from Judith Butler. We get distracted from being individuals because we get stuck on being a man or being a lady, right? And being an individual means having individual wants, needs, strengths, and skills, right? Ultimately, the institution of gender determines those individual wants, needs, strengths, and skills are either normal or aberrant. Normal for men or aberrant for men. Normal for women or aberrant for women. Wearing Incredible Hulk t-shirt, right? This is considered vaguely aberrant, right? Because, the Hulk doesn't represent you. Oh, the Hulk represents me, let me tell you. And the reason these things are so heated is because we used to have, we still have institutionalized racism to an extent, but segregated bathrooms and whether black people can vote, well, you could argue that black people voting in the U.S. is still an issue, but, the race segregated bathrooms that were argued to be a safety issue back in the day are now seen as, they were just racist. We still have that physical segregation in gender, in institutionalized gender. And that's going to fall hard because the separation of men and women is so intense. It's seen as intensely important. From remember, religion is part of institution. And all the Abrahamic faiths are based on, Adam and Eve, and men and women are created at the same time. And then a few lines down, man's created and then woman's created. What the heck? That's where we get Lilith from. That, as best anybody can tell, there were two different tribes with similar but not quite the same creation myths. So they didn't want to pick one, so they stuffed them back in and came up with Lilith, like one of those, expanded universe Star Wars canon things. But yeah, it was literally one group had man and woman created at the same time. Another group had man created first, and then woman formed from a piece of man. Now, those are fundamentally different institutions, right? And this idea that men and women need to be kept from each other is also an institution. The fact that that's the way to keep women safe is also an institution. And obviously, naturally, that was not just an instinct. How the genders have been segregated has been in flux throughout all of human history. The whole separating, women not going out in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, the different Greek city-states having radically different opinions of how women should behave between like Athens and Sparta and whatnot. the fact that in Orthodox synagogues, women sit in a completely different section, farther away from the action. I won't go to those synagogues because all they do is freaking talk and their kids are making noise. And I want to actually pay attention to the service, and you can't hear shit up there. I just refuse to go. Like, no, opting out. There's, I talked before about women can't be priests. And someone in the comments said, well, what's a male nun? And someone said a monk. And there you go. Right? But it's the institution that fights deconstruction more than the individuals, right? I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene was going on about trans people dancing half naked in the streets, and so they're aberrant. You remember the whole bleach blonde, bad built butch body? And her responding by posting a picture of herself, a heavily photoshopped picture of herself in a bikini. It's okay for a woman to be depicted and distributed in public, a picture of her, half naked, that way, according to Marjorie Taylor Greene. But trans people doing that is aberrant. It's the idea of men doing female behaviors, right? Because that's one of those things, for whatever reason, in conservative circles, that's shifted. That's not, she's being immodest anymore. Now she's hot. And that's a status symbol. And I'm not quite sure when that changed, certainly when everybody had to rewrite the whole thing with Melania because she did nude modeling or topless modeling. I don't know, there's anything freaking wrong with that. She's a gorgeous woman. But all of a sudden, oh no, but it happened before that, right? If you go into conservative circles, that idea of the bikini calendar. You remember those mugs that as you put cold stuff in, the clothes disappeared? I don't know if you remember those. I was exposed to those as children. That was normal back then. But yeah, the bikini calendar, it's almost like it's, oh no, now conservative women wear bikinis, but also are in Congress. They've shifted the institution of gender, but they are still fiercely guarding their interpretation and their ability to control the institution of gender. And again, it's not about the details of the institution per se. It's that at any given time, there is man, the institution, and woman, the institution. And you're supposed to stay in your fucking lane. The institution, controlled and manipulated by a relatively small amount of people. There's that oligarchy I was looking for in the original, call to submissions. That changes and everyone has to follow it, whether they like it or not. And sometimes it just creeps sort of naturally. Sometimes we get big leaps forward, like women's suffrage, like, second wave feminism with, we clawed back Roe versus Wade in the US, but, broad strokes. And there are parts of the world where the institution of gender is very much still that traditional definition of patriarchy. I mean, the lack of sanitary, private, public washrooms in schools in some parts of the world. The menstruation taboos in certain parts of the world. But that doesn't mean that our institution of gender is any more rigid here just because it's perceived as more equal. I will explain. She-Ra in shorts, right? You can't have the girly girl heroines anymore. The institution of gender involving what a female hero looks like has changed, right? Wonder Woman can't be in the bikini cut outfit anymore. There has to be a bit of a skirt. She-Ra can't be in the little skirt anymore. She needs to be in shorts. If a girl wants to wear the old version, she's socially punished because that's not good for women. You see how this goes? This fits much more with what we're seeing than classical patriarchy theory. And the reason I like it is because it encompasses what's wrong with gender critical radical feminism. See, I am using their terms because call people what they want to be called. It explains the gender critical radical feminism. It explains trads, the more traditional nuclear family, all that stuff, even though people who practice it, they preach it. But it also explains the pronoun warriors that are trying to create their own alternative institution of call people what they want to be called, no holds barred. It's the same follow the leader, right? It has all the same characteristics. Instead of doing a reasonable call people by the name and the pronouns that they want to be called, and pronouns have to have a commonly understood meaning because they're a placeholder denoting a discernible gender. If there isn't a discernible gender attached to the pronoun, it's a nickname, not a pronoun. So they want all these different pronouns and this, that, and the next thing because they're trying to create another institution that they control. That's why it's so tightly policed, and that's why people get canceled for doing it wrong. See how it works? It applies to every circumstance. There's really nothing anomalous here. There's nothing outside the model. And that's why this is so cool. We actually work together. We come up with an inclusive definition of institutionalized sexism that fits everything we're observing and doesn't leave out the experiences out of men who don't fit gender norms and are punished for it because institutionalized sexism is socially enforced. And we all have to be really careful about that because we're trained in it. And so we just respond to what's normal or not normal, as opposed to going, hold on, is this upholding an individual's right to be an individual, with reasonable accommodation from society? And, some things do. In the case of J.K. Rowling insisting that David Tennant was using his privilege to shut up a woman of color, come on. That's just using the stereotype of man as predator to shut him up. And it was, the fact that she's so shameless about the stuff she does is it's a feature, not a bug. It's the same way Marjorie Taylor Greene is shameless. It's the same way Lauren Boebert is shameless. That whole thing about on The Boys where Firecracker, the conservative media influencer, gets caught red-handed doing something and immediately goes, I've been saved by Jesus. Now here's all the bad things she did. It's a dueling game of social punishments that J.K. Rowling has embraced metaphors like, witches that wouldn't burn and things like that to burn other people. She is using her status as a woman higher up in the institution of gender to knock down a man that because supporting your kid is seen as less traditionally manly, right? But being a predator is seen as more in keeping with the institution of masculinity that we're functioning under right now. Well, they're forcing him into the predator box and punishing him for being a sensitive, caring dad. And the fact that a lot of media says adoptive father, it's accurate. But they're trying to go like, she's not really his kid. You know, that no, he's her dad. And he's proud of her. And he's being a good dad. But they're trying to use the institution of gender to take David Tennant from a loving father who's going to go scrap for his kid to a misogynistic predator that's telling a woman of color to shut up. Instead of, she's a politician with anti-trans views. They're on different sides of an issue. She's come at his kid. Saying he just wants her to shut up is polite. You see how they're using the institution of gender to warp the issue? Right. That's how it works. And I haven't been able to find a scenario yet that the idea of institutionalized sexism doesn't work well in this regard, because it's not about man better, woman better. It's how much do you align with the traditional definition of masculinity? How much do you align with the traditional femininity? And how quickly do you adapt to the changing trends? And the adaptation to the changing trends is what ultimately keeps all of us powerless within this system. There are some people at the top who have a bit more play. You know, you know they're doing cross-dressing parties in parts of the U.S. government. And I mean, there used to be, you know, drag shows sort of an open secret in the military because, you don't get much manlier than a military. So if a bunch of them want to dress up like women for shits and giggles, why not? You see what I mean? Like, the more manly you perform in one way, the more you can get away with feminine behavior in others. The Rock doing Taylor Swift Shake It Off and lip sync battle, you know. Tom Holland kind of broke that with the umbrella thing, but a regular guy would be very treated very differently than the guy who played Spider-Man, so it still sort of fits, right? And the whole be a man thing, be ladylike, we have to consciously resist that in our judgments of other people. And I think we're going to do better challenging that under an institutionalized sexism model that affects men and women and everyone. Because if somebody identifies as non-binary, they have to go out of their way to look like right on the line to let people know that they are non-binary. Because if someone doesn't perform masculine or perform feminine or perform neither to let people know, other people are made uncomfortable. And I don't know that we're ever going to completely get rid of this. Probably not. It serves a social function. But we can understand the institution of gender without being sexist within that model, treating aberrant men as dangerous and aberrant women as bitchy or slutty, right? I think this works. What do you think? The other thing we did this week on the Discord was we joked about a Leanna haters party, and the more people put names on the list, the cooler it sounded. Like, oh my God, the people who would all be in the same room, you know, there'd be a brawl. By the end of the night, there'd be a brawl, and it'd be amazing. It would be so cool. I'm like, I want to do this. I want to invite people to a party to hate me. I'm just kidding. That's too much work for people who don't like me. But yeah, it was pretty funny. The Discord's a great place. It's a lot of work, but it's rewarding. But yeah, what do you think of this idea of institutional sexism? Personally, I'm going to be using that more. I'm going to be using that going forward on this channel. I like it better than both patriarchy and toxic masculinity. And it serves the same purpose because then, you know, we can talk about institutionalized sexism when it comes to like gender critical feminists and stuff like that. Let me know what you think. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. You guys have been super, super generous. Let's keep the support going for the coffee. People are in quite a bit of financial struggle this month. The whole rate cuts and all that stuff. Well, the rate increases. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.